Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 258 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review, I'm going to be reviewing the new album from the musical project of a Wisconsin-based singer-songwriter named Justin Vernon, who you may know for coming out with one of the most harrowing breakup albums of the 21st century with For Emma Forever Ago, even though ever since that album, which he recorded in a cabin by himself with just a few instruments, he has since then kind of been transitioning into bigger arrangements and a full band on later records. Of course, I am talking about the artist known as Bon Iver, which is definitely one of critics' favorite indie artists of the 21st century. Finally, going to review them for the first time here on this channel, and I'm going to review their fourth studio album, which was released on August 9th, 2019, digitally, and then released physically on August 30th, 2019. And the album is called I, and that's lowercase I, two lowercase i's with an apostrophe in the middle, kind of a strange title there. Really like this album cover. It definitely, it looks kind of like a collage, and yet it really does fit with sort of the feel of the album very well, because the album feels very organic, but at the same time there's some kind of strange electronic manipulations going on that sort of, make it feel a little more angular, if you think about angular in the sense of like Radiohead Kid A sort of experimentation. And then there's the back. There's 13 songs on the record, and it's only 39 minutes long. Released on Jaguar, who has been the label for Bon Iver ever since re-releasing For Emma Forever Ago, his 2007 debut on the label in early 2008. And since then, it's pretty much been one of the most seminal singer-songwriter records of all time. And it's kind of like a little slipcover. I bought this at Soundgarden in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's got a gatefold. And in the gatefold, these are some kind of warped, somewhat altered photos of all the musicians and people that contributed to the album, which is quite a bit of people. Probably the most I've ever seen on a Bon Iver record, as other albums of his, even his other records of the full band, they still sound very much like just Justin Vernon himself. Liner notes of the band lineup. Here's the lyrics here. These photos in here. Then you can't really see it there, but there are liner notes on the back of that booklet. Here's the vinyl sleeve, side A, and then there's side B. Yeah, and that's the vinyl packaging for the latest album from Bon Iver called I. Yeah, and there's a pretty good reason why this album is the first Bon Iver album I've properly reviewed. Um, that's because I will say, while I've always appreciated For Emma Forever Ago, I've never really been able to get into it or really get emotionally drawn to it the way most people were. His second album, which was a self-titled record, that was his first full band record with some bigger arrangements, and sometimes the experiments did result in some pretty beautiful, compelling pieces, but then other times, and actually more often than not, they just kind of felt a little bit like unfocused, sort of poorly mixed experiments a little bit. But it would be 2016's 22 Million that I just did not care for at all. I mean, it was a very polarizing record. I know that there were definitely plenty of other people that loved it. I was one of those people who thought the record was like very poorly mixed. I thought the all the decoding references in its lyrics were pretty grating. The heavily manipulated vocals definitely were a little bit mushy in my opinion. I just did not really like that album. But the teaser tracks for this new LP actually really caught me by surprise. And it actually got me excited to hear this album. The two singles, especially, that did that for me were the tracks Hey Ma and You Man Like, which were released together at the same time. And this record actually was supposed to be released on August 30th, but then it was released a few weeks before for digital format only though. So to get the vinyl, fans had to wait a few more weeks to do that, and it definitely was. And let me say, this album was so worth the wait. It is easily my favorite Bon Iver record, and definitely one of my favorite singer-songwriter albums of the year. Now, it definitely does sort of swim around in a similar sea of ideas that 22 Million did. There's still some electronic manipulation going on and all kinds of loops and sort of lo-fi sampling too. But this time around, the mixing is miles better, and so is the songwriting. The album musically feels a little more cohesive, as I feel like it's a perfect balance and distillation of everything Bon Iver has been working with up to this point. And also, I was very happy to hear more of Justin Vernon's kind of unadorned, not very manipulated voice, because he really can, his voice is like really so much more moving and effective when it's just kind of raw and doesn't have a whole bunch of, warbly auto-tune effects on it. The opening track does start. Opening track is this kind of odd sort of lo-fi sample of what sounds like someone climbing upstairs, and even like birds doing Morse code or something like that. It's a very kind of strange way to open the record, and yet it's a very beautiful kind of intimate moment before it transitions into the first actual song on the record, I My, which opens up with this kind of warbly, sort of heavily manipulated vocal, which is actually coming from Mr. James Blake, and I think opens up the song really well. And transitions very well into the kind of lonely singing of Justin Vernon, where he talks about how living in a lonesome way has been looking has had him look in other ways. But then there's this very emotionally affecting lyric. But on a bright fall morning, I'm with it. stood a while within it. Man, you have to know the way it goes. And all the guest vocals on the record, I think, on the track sound great too, over the kind of twangy guitars, sped up pianos, and very beautiful sort of funeral horns on the track too. The next track, We, on the other hand, takes more of this Native American, almost African rhythm with the plucky guitars and the sort of chant-like background vocals, and the opening of the track sounds the Justin singing at the beginning of the track kind of sounds a little bit like some sort of like tribal chant a little bit, so therefore it's like very moving and dark um, and also the lyrics that he does deliver on the track are definitely very good too. The lyrics on this album, I will say, definitely sound a lot better in that they're still a little complex and at times a little bit hard to digest, but this time around I actually, connect with the emotions that this music is evoking, whereas on his last album I felt like I was having one single emotion kind of spoon-fed to me for the whole time that I actually didn't really want to feel necessarily. The track Holy Fields is a much more minimal track on the record. Features this kind of stuttering synth chords and sort of airy white noise samples and some wispy strings. And there's Justin Vernon's vocal on top of that. Definitely a very beautiful combination, even though I will say my main issue with the track is that the pacing of it feels a little bit awkward. I mean, the way that the synth, the strings, and the voice are trying to syncopate with one another doesn't quite come together. Even though I do really like the lyrics about how he is talking about how concerned like his friends and his family have become about his well-being, because as you could tell from his last few albums, he's really been through a lot, and he's sort of finding that the dawn isn't rising, and the land isn't rising either, but he's just trying his best to live a better, healthier life. And also that moment towards the end where he goes into the higher register is just so beautiful. Like it hits me in the feels every time. Then we get into an amazing midsection on the record, which starts with the track Hey Ma, which this is the kind of emotionally moving ballad that would give like Skinny Love a run for its money. Yeah, I said it. It could give Skinny Love a run for its money. Don't hate me for that. Anyway, this track is incredible. I love the very kind of dreamy ambient instrumentation. It blends so well with the folkier instrumentation. Really like that kind of high-pitched manipulated vocal sample. And also the chorus is easily one of the best hooks I think Vernon has ever written. His vocals, I think, really reflect that. You're back and forth with that. It's like so good. And I think also really like the kind of noisy midsection or bridge, whatever you want to call it. And the song eventually ends with mostly a cappella, with mostly his voice and like a little synth drone, and it's like just such a very raw moment on the record. It's definitely a track that many For Emma Forever Ago fans will likely enjoy. The track You, Man Like, takes a little bit of a turn stylistically by actually embracing more elements of gospel than I think most people are used to from Justin Vernon. with the jaunty pianos, the weepy harmonicas, the very beautiful, almost communal group vocals on the track, and there is also an all-star cast of guest singers to appear on the track. We have people like Bruce Hornsby, Moses Sumney, Jen Wasner, Bryce Dessner of the National, and the Brooklyn Youth Chorus too. And I also love that point in the middle of the song where all the guest vocalists have their like little solo line. I think they transition to each other really well. For example, Moses Sumney. He sounds so damn good on this track, I'm telling you. The track Naeem, I have no idea how to say it, but anyway, it sort of feels like a little bit of a more uplifting moment on the record, both musically and actually maybe even a little bit lyrically, as you know, after the last couple of tracks being kind of reflecting on grief and sort of how emotionally cutting that can be. We have this track that's sort of about trying to move on and you can hear a little bit of all along you can hear crying around you, and it sort of makes you feel comfort to know that people are feeling the same things that you are. And its blend of sounds I think is very beautiful. It's beautiful. The kind of lo-fi pianos, the choral vocals. I can hear crying. The strings on there sound great too, as do the I can hear, the kind of programmed vocal samples. And then the song goes into this very, like, almost epic middle section where we're getting these uplifting guitars and kind of chugging percussion. And the song does end very well with some horns. The track Jelmore is again another more minimal moment on the record, and really focusing more on the electronic side of Bon Iver. Bon Iver with the kind of chirpy synths, the synth chords, the kind of sad saxophones, along with a very moving vocal presence, which does include a one line that really hits like a ton of bricks. We'll all be gone by the falling light. It may not be structurally the best song on the record, but it definitely is very beautiful. And from that point on, we do get a really nice kind of smooth album flow for the back half of the record. I love how the track flows into the track Faith, which I'd have to say is my favorite cut on the entire record, where the song seems to be about him sort of, finally coming to terms with his faith and how he hasn't really been handling it the way he should. And he's sort of finding peace even in those moments where he's lying awake at night and sort of finding out the wonderful things he's learned to waste. It definitely reminds me a little bit of maybe a cut off of the Bon Iver record from 2011. Even though the song, in my opinion, is probably a little more compelling. But that moment in the track that really just wrecks me every time in the best way is when it gets into that kind of louder midsection with the roaring bass synths and the acoustic guitars, the kind of distorted background vocals. The strings, I think, sound really at home on there too. And he's sort of singing about trying to spread more faith to his loved ones too. Uh, It's just a flat out it's just a flat out knockout for me, and I love it. The track Marion is definitely another one that will appeal to those who consider Forever Ago Bon Iver's best album, which would be definitely most people, as their other two records are a little more divisive. The divisive, the kind of campfire acoustic guitars, the balmy strings, and just the simple four lines that are on the track are enough to make the song a very just almost strangely heartwarming moment on the record. The track Salem opens up with a kind of moody OP1 synthesizer, third styling on there, and sort of this is probably the closest the song goes to be this record goes to being, kind of slightly political, as it does talk about how even people with kind of, a terrible mental health condition still needs some elasticity, empowerment, and ease, as the lyrics do suggest. I also love the moment where the song builds up and gets these really beautiful strings and kind of weepy xylophones, and kind of Native American inspired percussion, which could be partly live and partly programmed. Definitely a very strong moment on the record, even though following this point are a couple of lulls in the track list for me. The track Shadiah musically is a little bit bland in terms of its reverb and sort of how one-dimensional the song feels in terms of it being basically just that for the straight 4 minutes of the song. Also, Vernon's falsetto on the track doesn't really do that much for me. That saxophone improvisation at the end of the track, though, is killer. The next track, Rabbi, is a pretty decent closer for the record. I really like how it feels a little bit like kind of a happy ending to this kind of lonely record. To this record, and I really like how all the songs, the main selling point of the back half of the record is how well the songs flow into one another, even on the most subpar moments on the record. As for this track, it's a pretty good song overall. It is beautiful, but I wish it didn't end so abruptly. It feels a little bit unsatisfying, and therefore kind of leaves a little bit to be desired here. So, this could be a more stronger ending to the record. But overall, I think this is a very good album. I love it. I didn't think I would be saying this. If you told me, like a year ago that I would be, wowed by a Bon Iver record, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But then, upon hearing some of the singles that tease for it, that actually became a reality. So, it's definitely the most I've ever loved a Bon Iver record. I don't know, so I know that there are definitely plenty of fans that will not agree, because, Bon Iver fans are kind of unique in what their favorite record is by them. I mean, most people would say Forever Ago. Some would say their self-titled album is their best. Heck, there are even people that consider 22 A Million their favorite, even though not very many. I'm not so sure how many people would consider I their favorite album by them, but, I don't really care, because it is my favorite. I'm going with a strong 7 to a light 8 on this new Bon Iver record, and I'll see you for episode 259.